I'm still waiting to hear back. The schedule that I put together shows dinner at 5 o'clock. Sometimes on the weekends they do it at 5:30. There's some of us that are going to right before dinner. We're going to run up to Bill's grave and do a little prayer meditation up there, just a couple minutes before we come back. So if you don't have transportation, see us, and we'll see if we can hook you up with some. But anybody that's interested, it should still be light enough to go up there and just thank Bill and Lois for the gift that they've given us. That's something I always do before I start a workshop. I try to do it in the middle of a workshop if I can find the time, and then I always stop before I leave because I'm never the same person before versus after on this deal. So what have we done? Glenn, you're all set up? You running? Okay. We've talked about steps 1, 2, and 3. All right. Hopefully, hopefully, I know that 90% at least or better have had a shift in their consciousness. Something has changed here, and you're not quite exactly sure what. And if you're like me, you're feeling sort of like you're drinking from a fire hose. It's just coming at you, and it's an experience, and sometimes it's pleasant, sometimes it's not, and every once in a while you need to come up for a gulp of air, and you're just wondering, who's got a hold of the spigot, I'd like to take a minute and kind of digress. Now that you've gotten some of the tools in your toolbox, I think we need to talk about and get a vision, a concept of how to work with these tools. We talked about step 1, powerlessness. Mark talked about that beautiful sentence about above everything, we must be rid of selfishness or it kills us as an AA topic. Here's another one for you, and I've done this a number of times at meetings. I go and I talk to a meeting, and I raise my hand. And I say, since I usually ask the question, is there anybody in here that's drank within the last week? And if there's no hands that go up, I'll usually say, okay, well, since alcohol is no longer our problem, and AA is not about alcohol or our problems, it's about finding God. Let's have a meeting about finding God. And man, you want to put a chill on a room? But that's really what we've been trying to introduce you to. AA is not about your problems. AA is not about alcohol. If you've gotten away from the physical craving and the mental obsession, AA is about the spiritual malady. Long-term sober, if you're going to make it for long-term sober and ride this pony the whole race, it's about the spiritual malady and finding God. The beauty is the byproduct of finding God is you don't want to drink. And your problems don't exist. And you get happy, joyous, and free and all the rest. But how does one attempt to do that? We've given you some exercises to show you this truth, but what more can you do about it? One of the things I like to envision is a golf ball. It's got the hard exterior shell on it. If you've ever cut open a golf ball, underneath there's a winding looks like a giant rubber band. And you pull the winding off and you weed through that, and I envision that as my character defects and my inventory, my 4-step and my fear inventory, and you pull it down. When you get down to the very center, there's a little teeny kernel. I have no idea what the heck it's made out of, but there's a little thing, like a little pebble inside there. Inside each one of us, we are the golf ball. You know how the golf ball's got all those divots? That's our drinking. That's all the abuse we take. Those 9 irons whacking on us until we finally make it to the cup, right? And we finally get into the cup, and then somebody plucks us out. God starts to clean off the dirt and the mess, and then we got this hard, crusty exterior, and you got to get down to the kernel. So we start peeling, and you peel off the hard crust, and you start on the unwinding process, and that's working the steps, and you get down to what? What's the true core? The true core is love that's inside of us, and we talk a lot in here about a spiritual mirror. Each of us is just a mirror. If you can get that analogy in your head, for me, it works wonderfully well. My character defects are just fingerprints and grease smudges on my mirror. And am I ineffective if I got some smudges? No. If you get to the right spot and get the right angle, I can still reflect light out. But you get too many smudges on there, and the vision gets kind of distorted, and you start to lose that. But the mirror is one of those mirrors, like you see, those security mirrors. It's a one-way mirror. Other people see what's going on the outside, but from you on the inside, you're looking out through, and you get this vision of what you see and what you think people see in the mirror, and what they're actually seeing may not be what's actually there. They may not be able to see the true self. But when you clean off all the smudges and the dirt off, then it becomes transparent. If I reflect love out to you, it gets reflected right back to me, which reflects back off to you, which reflects back to me. And it's an upward spiral, the same way that you can have a downward spiral. I get mad at you, you say something that hurts my feelings, I say something back, hurts your feelings, and you can have the down. Just ask anybody that's married and they know about the downward spiral. All right? There's also an upward spiral. All right? Very important concept. What we've started you on here is an upward spiral. But there's exercises that we have left incomplete. To continue that spiral, you're going to have to finish these exercises. That's where you're going to truly demonstrate your willingness, is if you go home tonight or tomorrow or next week and you finish these exercises and you ride this pony and you see where this actually takes you to. You know, there's a lot more to this. I spoke earlier about a child. You know, you look into the cradle and what does the child first thing they do? They smile back at you with unconditional love. That's the real goal, is unconditional love. And what are the characteristics that little kids have? Our whole goal in life to get closer to God. I mean, that's like as pure as you're going to get. A child that's a newborn hasn't been defiled yet by the experiences of life. Their ego hasn't built. They don't have that. What do they have? They have unconditional love. They got the sparkly eyes. Every single one of them has the sparkly eyes. And that's what we're looking to get back to, is to that child that's within us. All right? Every single one of them has this tremendous love, and everything is new. There's an excitement, no matter what the scenario is. Oh, the diaper's wet, you know. As long as you don't leave them in that wet and it starts to hurt them, they're just as they'll play in it. That doesn't matter to them, you know. Oh, stick your hand. We can draw on the walls with it, you know. It's, you know, and what do? We walk in and go, ah, what are you doing? Because we're judging that act. To them, it's a new experience. It's a new experience. Now, who's to say whether it's good or bad? You know, the closer, and I'm saying not go back to becoming an infant. Don't become immature. What I'm saying is become more childlike is our goal. To get back to where every day, whether today's a beautiful sunny day, and I'm sure there's some people sitting in here, man, I'd love to be on the ski slope. So they're unhappy. And tomorrow it's going to be a rainy day, and they're going to be sitting here going, man, I wish it wasn't raining. You know, either way, sunny day, rainy day, they're still miserable. And what are they missing? They're missing the current moment. What else do little children have? Smiles. It is a pure, direct link to the human heart that cannot be missed. If I smile with a true, honest love, unconditional love smile, I don't care what mood you're in, it cuts through you like a knife. Now, you may be able to close that hole off really, really quick and get the armor back up pretty darn fast, but I've touched you. I've gotten inside your wall. Where did I learn that? Little kids. What else do they have? Laughter and happiness. What does our big book say? Happy, joyous, free. We absolutely insist on enjoying life. How many people in here felt that way when they walked into this workshop? You know? Oh, the traffic, I'm late. What's this going to happen? I mean, there's been at least a dozen people that have shared, man, I came up here to relax and be slothful, and I didn't know I was going to do work. You know? Man, there's been a shift in those people. Woo! The magic is happening if you can be in the moment and enjoy the magic, right? So the goal is to get back to the little kid. The tools we've given you, the second step proposition exercise, and here's where I'm boomeranging. I'm coming back to the second step proposition exercise. That tool will become extremely important in your life if you can use the tool. The first thing you have to do is be conscious enough to realize there's something wrong in you. It's great to write all this information down and have the card, but if you don't use the card and it collects dust, it's no good to you. You might as well not have even written it. As a matter of fact, it's probably a detriment to write the card and not use it, because now you've woken up the beast and you know what the real problem is, but you're still not willing to face it. You're not willing to deal with it. And that will boomerang on you and kill you. So watching is extremely important. Paying attention to the moment. What's really going on? How many people can hear that motor that's running? Did you notice it when it kicked on? Those are the people that are conscious, awake, and aware. Awake to the floor creaking. Awaken to the person coughing. Awaken to the person whose nose is whistling. You know? Now they're self-conscious. If you can be in the moment, I'm taking off my AA hat, by the way. This is my own personal concept, and a lot of people tend to identify with it, but it's something it's proven to be so true for me. Human being is made up of four things, all right? There's your physical body. your physical presence, the shell. It's going to stay here when you die. It's what rots. It's your physical being, all right? Second thing we all know we've all got is a mind, all right? There's part number 2. Have you ever watched yourself think? You know, or you're doing a math problem one week, because I've had this happen when I was a kid. I do the math problem one week and I had it, man. I knew that. Dang, I got that. Teacher would give you the exact same math problem the next week. You're looking at it and you're going, duh! And you're watching yourself think, what an idiot. Why can't you did this last week? And that little voice is going off in your head, which tells me that there has to be 2 things up there. There's not just my mind, but there's that part of me that can watch my mind. That's the ego. It's very judgmental. That's the voice that goes off in our head. That's the one that talks to us constantly. All right? The ego's job is to get me out of the moment, to get me away from the whistling noise, to get me away from that motor that's running, to the heavy breathing in the room, to the peace and the serenity. And it uses 2 tools, past and future. It'll drag me into the past, or it'll drag me into the future. What's going to happen in 30 seconds, or it'll take me back 30 seconds in the past. And the problem is it hopscotches back and forth, back and forth, back and forth to keep me out of the present moment. All right? Where is the only place that God can be found, that you can be consciously connected to God, is in the present moment. All right? And the moment this present moment is over, then you're in the next present moment, and then the next present moment. And if something happens in this present moment, and you focus on it, and you've now gone to the next present moment, but you're still back 1 moment ago, you're not in the present moment again, which means you can't be connected to God. Does that make sense? For a lot of people, they're looking at me like I got an eyeball in the middle of my forehead. All right? By the ego focusing on that ex-husband or ex-wife, it's in the past. By the ego focusing on that next true love, it's in the future. If you can be conscious, awake, and aware to that fact that your ego, because your ego's whole job is to try to maintain control of the mind. So it's going to keep the mind thinking. It's going to watch it, and if it's not going the direction it wants, it's going to throw something out. Here's a piece of past. Go grab a hold of that mind and see if you can. And there comes the hamster on the wheel, thinking about the past. And what that dirty SOB did to me, and the divorce, and how they took the kids and they took the money. I had a conversation with somebody on the break, and he's like, yeah, and my wife, she raped me. She took all my money. And I said, whose money? And he goes, well, mine and God's. And I said, whose money? He said, well, it's God's, but I had a good plan for it. He was living in the past. In that moment, he was in the past. Or you can go with the same thing in the future, that job, or when we get out of here, or when I go to make this amend, or whatever. Past, present, past, present, past, present. Past, future. The key is to be in the present moment, because that's the only place that God can be. Now, what does the voice look like that the ego talks to you? That's column 3 of inventory. All right? That's what's really important to figure out and to be able to recognize. Because if you can recognize the voices as they go off in your head, you can say, whoop, it's time out. I know you. I've seen that voice. I recognize you. That's whoever the voice happens to be. If I'm hearing that voice, my ego must be afraid of something. What is the fear? And that's when you can slam on the brakes and go to the card. The card is a great tool, but if you can't watch and know when to go to the card, it's no good to you. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, on the step 1 questions, there was question number 6. Does anybody in here have something written down for question number 6 that's willing to get up and for us to take a look at what they wrote? Matt, you want to give that a shot? Sure. I got a mic here. You don't actually have to get up. You can stay right there and just grab this sucker.
Yeah, I was going to say move away from that.
Move away from that microphone.
This is where I knew I was going to be a prop. Doing yeah. I'm resentful at this lady that's running the post-abortion healing group that I'm going to. I thought she took a shot at me last Wednesday.
Okay, so this woman, does she have a name?
Teresa.
Teresa, okay. Teresa's column 1, and column 2 is she took a shot at you? Is there more? Can you be more specific?
I believe she took a shot at me trying to convince me that I chose to actually do that when I really didn't want to make that happen.
Okay. So does everybody understand what he's saying? Well, you're going to have to get a little more detail about this, which I'm not sure. Do you want to go there?
Sure.
Okay.
This is the big thing
Great.
that's dragging me around right now.
All right. Bring it out.
Be
you want,
more specific
do you want
to
me
the
to?
second column.
Yeah, the second column. What exactly happened? Because they're going to have to understand the story.
I was sharing the grief and pain that I put my ex-girlfriend through and the child for going through with the abortion 10 years ago.
Who's got the other mic, by the way, the cordless? Anybody know where that is? Oh, here it is. I got it. You want that on or off? Okay. Okay, try that.
Hello? All right.
There you go.
Yeah, I was going through a little bit of catharsis emotionally about the pain that I put myself, my ex-girlfriend, and the child through for the abortion 10 years ago with my girlfriend.
So he's going to a post-abortion healing group where they deal with the fact that you were party and parcel to an abortion occurring. And the leader of this group, he feels, took a shot at him.
Mm-hmm.
All right? That's his column 2. That's what he's upset about. All right?
Something she said to you.
Yeah, she had her finger pointed at me, and she's like, I think you're believing you chose to do that when you really didn't have a choice, kind of what you were saying before. But
All right? Everybody square with what column 2 is.
Mm-hmm.
All right? So, what voice is the first voice he's going to hear in his head? You're bad, right? But who's the voice? Give us a name for that. It is ego, but ego has 1,000 characters.
I'm the judge.
Ah, there we go. We got a judge. He's hearing somebody is judging me. Well, wait a minute. The ego's saying, I'm the judge. I get to decide whether I had a part in this and whether I made the right decision or not. You guys see that? Very important voice to be able to understand and differentiate. He's hearing the judge. A lot of you were throwing out other answers, but you were taking it to the nth degree. You'd already followed through the process. You need to be able to pick up. If he can hear the judge go off, man, he can slam on the brakes and go right to the card. Who else is in there?
Check this out. This is a great one to show the other side of the ego. This lady says to him that you weren't involved in the choice around this abortion 10 years ago, right? And what his ego's done is wrapped around that, and I think the reason he reacted that, there's a part of him that absolutely wants to believe he was associated with making a conscious choice around that event. And he's pissed off that she thinks he didn't have a choice.
She's taking away his power. Right?
She's in Al-Anon. She's really great.
Yeah.
But he's pissed off at her, right?
Pride. No one should see that I'm not involved in making choices in my life. Right? Ambition. What'd you want?
I wanted her love and compassion and tenderness at that moment.
Yeah.
I didn't want her to tell me I was in denial because I don't have that.
Now, what voice is that? It's a combination of the victim, but it's really a child. He wants her love and compassion. She's like a loving mother, and he wants her acceptance. Can you see that? All right? If he can recognize that voice, he's already transitioned. The judge has already made a decision that this woman is off base, but it's also threatening the fact that this feeling he's got towards her. You know, that's where the real rub is in this deal. Is he's got her up on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking at her and he's like, wow, look at this. And he wants her acceptance like a little child wants from a mother. And all of a sudden she's going like this. You notice he said, she pointed her finger at me. Yeah. That's the image I got in my mind, whether she was doing that or not. You little bad boy. And don't you know, you dummy, you didn't have a choice in this. And she's scolding him emotionally. There's another character in there. So now we got a judge, we got a victim, and we got a little child.
And then security. What do you need to be okay? At that moment in time, what did you need from her to be okay?
I needed reassurance, validation.
Right. Didn't get that. See, in the third column, it's where you're literally fighting for your life.
That's right.
In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancy real, has the power to kill. You're fighting for your life.
Which character was fighting for its life? The little kid, right? The little envious kid who's looking forward. His image is about to be shattered because here's his idol who's about ready to smack him. You know? She's fallen off her pedestal. Either she falls off her pedestal or she's right, and that goes directly, it flies in the face of the judge. Does that make sense? Right? Anytime we get a judge, we get a jury. There's a quick little decision in our mind, and we're the judge and the jury. There's also an executioner. Now the executioner says she's guilty. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And now all of a sudden he's got to go and make up an excuse in his mind to prove why he's right and she's wrong, but yet she's the idol. Can you see there's a huge conflict? And what does it do? It opens that little box I've been talking about behind the wall. And out comes this stuff. It starts to bubble. And what does he have to do? His ego's trying to control his mind. He's fighting for his emotional life. He doesn't know what's going on, so he tries to slam the lid back down on the box, but his fingers have little cracks between them. And it starts to seep through. We call that submarining. You know? You ever see the submarine movies where the submarine gets too deep and the pressure, and all of a sudden you get a little water come, psh, sprays over here, and they go running over, and they put their hands over there, and then psh, comes over here, and you run out of hands. You know? That's submarining. We do that emotionally. And he's been submarining now for however long it's been since he got to here. He's been trying to keep, and he's been holding out his own. But what happens when there's more spray than you can cover up? Then it starts to manifest itself physically, and you start acting out. You start doing things, your character defects, what the ego's really got going on in your mind. You start saying things, hurtful things. So you may run into somebody that you really do care about, but you're mad about what's going on over here, and so you excoriate this person over here. You chop them to ribbons with sarcasm, all because you're hurt over here and you can't able to control those fear and the anger and those emotions over there. It's gotten out of hand. Can you see how that can occur? Where is the real key to this whole deal? Being able to watch and recognize the characters as they occur. That is crucial.
There's a key piece in this that it's into this self-loathing. You can say, is to pick up on that I've seen so often in my third step is this woman makes a statement to him, which is that you didn't have a choice around that. It's a concept, right? Just like no free will. Well, that concept that he wasn't involved in a choice back 10 years ago in terms of him and this woman and the act to bring about a child and then the abortion, what that does is the reason he doesn't like that, a part of him doesn't like that, is because if that's true, then he don't get to judge himself. She took away his capacity to play God on an action that he was involved with 10 years ago. And there's a part of him that plays God that doesn't like that. See? So there's such a strong judge associated with this piece in this particular piece that we're talking about. Real quick, I don't want to forget this. This is great. The ego's sole function is that you believe that you're separate from everybody and everything. And some of its tools, its most predominant tool is judgment. Example, a lady came up the break and she said, it's a great question. She said, I really liked almost everything you had to say until you said that you were married and divorced 4 times. And I can't hear anything you said since then. She said, what is wrong with me? And I said, there's nothing wrong with you. That's what the ego does to separate from truth. Judge. You know, now if I'd had more time because we were getting ready to start, I would have asked her some questions like, do you really believe I chose to get married 4 times and divorced? Because that's expensive, right? And it's painful. And it doesn't show well in public. And I could go on and on. Now here's the rest of the story. There's only the will of God. I and those 4 ladies, all of us, in hindsight, benefited tremendously from those marriages, and those marriages were supposed to happen. But what does the ego do? I mean, there's some people in here. How many? All I have to do is show hands. How many of you have been married more than 2 times? Okay. The path, we don't know what the path is, but I thought what you said was so beautiful to lead into the 4th step because, of course, I've done that for years, right? I'll give you an example in reverse. The man that I call my sponsor right now has been married to the same woman for 28 years. You know what my head says about that? What can that man tell me about a relationship? He's been with one woman for 28 years. See, he can't help me. I need to find a man who's been married and divorced 4 times, but don't do that anymore. You follow me? So there's 2 ways you look at it. That the judgment still happens. See, I have a judgment about somebody that'd be crazy enough to be the same woman for 30 years. You understand what I'm saying? Here's what you learn to do, and it's back to watch. The judgment arises. You watch the judgment. You don't get involved with it. And you say, well, thanks for sharing. And you just kind of... because you're not involved, because you see it's just another tool of separation, isn't it? Right? We've all got them, and they happen on... Well, our ego uses many things. It'll use age, it'll use race, it'll use gender, it'll use... I mean, the list is endless of the things it will do, you see, to separate. It's constant separation, then constant state of loneliness and not a part of those kinds of things. But
you had a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, this is a major question. I've tried to do 4-step, and as you know, I'm going to try to do it now. But 4-step, I did column 1 and 2, filled them out, had pages. I'm one of those people. And then I'd be sitting at home, alone, trying to do column 3 and 4, and went nuts, and basically stopped. And I had a great sponsor, a big book thumping, and I'd go see her once a week and everything like that, and we're, hounding out, and I quit. How do you sit at home alone in the middle of your disease, and do column 3 and 4? I can't come up with the conclusions. You're coming up and fill them out.
For me personally, I don't allow that to happen. Until somebody's got some skills with how to do inventory, they need the leadership. They need somebody to show them. Bill and Bob didn't say, well, here's the form, fill it out, and come back and see me. They'd sit down. And if you read our history books, Dr. Bob was very clear. He'd sit down and he'd explain to you what your character defects were. He'd show them to you, and he'd say, now, isn't that your experience? I use the short form, which is that you'll find in your packet. There's one that's even filled out. I let the drunk fill out column 1 and column 2, and then he gives me the forms. And we talk, just like we're talking now. We talk about these resentments. We talk about the areas of self, the 7 areas that get affected, and how did that affect you? And I do basically a verbal column 3 and column 4, and I'm filling out, I'm writing down the answers for the guy about column 3 and column 4. And at the time I'm doing it, I'm showing him the characters. When somebody hurts you, the very first person for me that shows up, if he's a man, it's Rambo. If it's a woman, it's Xena, the warrior princess, And where does that go? Now that they're angry, they know that they can't kill somebody, so who shows up next? The judge. The judge is going to make a judgment as to whether this was really an egregious harm that was occurred to me. The judge judges it, the jury convicts him, then the executioner shows up. All right? Just like he had, judge, jury, executioner. All right? Well, you can't go ahead and execute somebody, but Rambo's sitting there saying, kill him, kill him. That's not going to work. So he hires a hitman, and that's the person that every alcoholic's got. The hitman will wait if it takes 25, 30 years. I'll wait in the grass until you make the mistake, and then you will pay. That's the hitman. That's the voice of the hitman. It's the same guy. Anybody hear road rage? Guess what? Guess who the road rage is? That's the hitman. Oh, if I come up on the right side and I cut over here and I cut in front of that little VW bug and then cut over here, I can go over there and slam on my brakes and, man, I'll show him. That's the hitman. And all of a sudden, you're in the move and you're going up and you shift from the slow lane, you go across 4 lanes of traffic, and now you're in your fast lane, you're just getting ready to slam on the brakes, and the SOB pulls off the exit and you missed your opportunity. Oh, you'll be looking for the next 3 weeks. Every time you drive that stretch of highway, you'll be going, man, I wonder if I see that guy, Those are the characters. I mean, we could spend hours and hours and hours talking about the various characters. Everybody's got different characters. You need to know the characters. Here's my point. What I want to talk about is, and I'm leading into the forgiveness side because there's obviously some wounds in this room. He was talking about this event, and he's been whipping himself. Mark talked about it. He's been using this abortion issue as a weapon against himself. He's got this hurt and this guilt and remorse over this event occurring. All right? Whether he sees whether he had any power or not at all, he has been using it as a weapon, and he's been flailing himself with it over and over. Anybody in this room that's got anything egregious that you have not forgiven, this is what your ego has been using it against you. The jury, the judge, the jury, the executioner are sitting there and they're whipping you with this, saying, they did this to you, and until they pay, you're not going to be healed. You can't give them over to God because they would have gotten away without your justice. All right? Who is that? There's a guy inside the wall called the emotional banker. He's the guy that charges interest. Now, if that person came back to you and said, you know what, I'm really sorry I hurt you, that cancels the actual harm. But the whole time that it took them from, it may only be 3 minutes from the time they hurt you to the time they came made amends, the emotional banker started the clock and the interest was running. Until they pay off that interest, no matter what, you can say, that's where it comes from. Oh, well, I forgave them, but I haven't forgotten. What voices that is the emotional banker. He's the guy talking. He's saying, yeah, I forgave what they did over here, but for some reason I still don't feel it in my heart. It's because there's this emotional hangover that's left. And it's the emotional banker in there that's charging the interest. Does that make sense? Now, a lot of divorces in here, right? We've been talking about it all weekend long. When someone hurts you inside the wall, there's very few people you let inside the wall, but when you let one of those people, and it's usually a spouse or a child, somebody that you're very close to, that you have the ability to unconditionally love at some point in a relationship, when they're inside the wall and they hurt you, they wound your spirit. For them to do that, a character comes out called the traitor. Very important character for you to understand. Because anytime the traitor comes out, there's the emotional banker right alongside with them. And even if you forgive the traitor, well, they were out of their mind, they didn't know it. Particularly Al-Anons, the guy he's an alcoholic. He was drunk. Maybe they can forgive the traitor, but the emotional banker can't be forgiven until they pay off that emotional debt. All right, that's going to come into play as you go through your inventory. The next time you write a 4-step, I want you to think as you write column 3, what characters? Write them down in the margin. What character is talking to me? Who is saying that nobody should treat me this way? I deserve better. Is it the victim? Is it the little child? Is it a mother? Is it a boss? And that, speaking of bosses, you can have traitors at work. If you have a partner or somebody that's at your same stratus and they hurt you, usually they're outside of the wall. But if they're a boss and you work for them and they turn around and they stab you in the back, guess what? Here comes a traitor. They shouldn't have done that to me. How dare they? And then the whole cycle starts. The whole idea about forgiveness that we're going to get to is to get rid of the emotional banker. It's to hopefully give you some tools right out of the big book for how do you get rid of the emotional banker. Because that's really what's wounded most of the people in this room. You're carrying around this guilt and this remorse. And if you can't turn it on the person who perpetrated the act to you, who are you going to perpetrate it upon? Yourself. Because now we're spiritual beings, right? Now there's this spiritual guru inside of us. There's another voice of the ego. Well, I can't take it out on my wife and my kids and the people close to me. But it's okay. I can do it to me. Remember the question that I wrote down here that I gave you guys last night? Is there anything about you? Where is it? Number 21. Do you loathe, hate, abhor, despise, or detest something about yourself? That should touch on the emotional banker and some of the harms that are inside you that you're whipping yourself with. And the question about forgiveness should also touch on the emotional banker from 2 different directions. You guys, can you see that? Does that make sense? All right. Yes, ma'am. Give that woman a mic. Here. Yeah. Well, which tape?
The tape around. Oh, there.
There we go. Got it.
Hi, my name's Ann. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Ann.
I don't completely understand, or even maybe I don't at all understand, why you're focusing on all these different characters. I feel like I missed a chapter, like you just launched into this and I'm in the dark.
Here's the Reader's Digest version. We all know what the problem is. It's whatever in column 2. They harmed me, right? The whole point is to look at our side of the street. We do that by looking at the areas that were harmed, which is column 3, the 7 areas of self that can be affected. That should lead us to our behavior in column 4. Where was I selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened? All right? What I did with this second step proposition exercise is we circumnavigated that process because we didn't have time in this weekend to go through the whole, how do you do that in the form of resentments and then fears and then harms done to others. Oh, there's a shortcut that you can get to. The real goal of all of this work is to get to the fear. Because if you can get to the fear and get rid of the fears are what trigger our character defects, right? So if you can get to the fear, then you can give the fear to God and get to what God wants you to be. All right? So the second step proposition exercise was just a way to show you how you can come up with a list of fears in various areas of your life that you've been unwilling to give to God. Now that you've got the card, it's a tool in your toolbox, but how do you know to go pull it out and use it? That's where the characters come in. by doing repeated inventories and writing inventory and doing in your process of your fifth step, you shouldn't just be looking for the harms you've done to others so that you can go clean it up on the amends. You should be listening for what voices were talking to me. Why was I able to carry this harm for 5, 10, 15 years with me? Who were the voices that were justifying this, what I know to be inappropriate behavior? Now, what I'm talking about is advanced AA here. I'm not talking about somebody that's new in recovery. That's why we ask those questions. I'm operating under the assumption that you've been through the steps before with a sponsor, that this isn't your first set of inventory. I would never take a new guy into this area because his ego will kill him. It's an emotional minefield. But if you've got a couple years of sobriety under your belt and your program is starting to get a little bit stale and you're going, right, another inventory, what's the point? What I'm trying to show you, there's a mother load here, you know? And it doesn't mean some people are dependent on inventory. Some people, they can't get through their life without writing a formal inventory once a month or once a week. They're what I call them inventory junkies. They got to sit down and analyze and analyze and analyze and analyze. With the second step proposition exercise, you can shortcut the whole system. You've got the fears. If you can be conscious and awake and watch for the characters, and any time by definition that you see a character, you must be in a position of fear. Self is threatened. Slam on the brakes and go to the card. Does that make sense?
I think I can help you with this. Another definition of ego is a mind-made false sense of self. And I'll use the example of the lady who described the divorce. The sense of who I am gets dictated by external events, i.e., in that divorce, first of all, she thinks she's a wife. She thinks she's a mother, right? The husband comes home, and she really thinks there's such a thing as a wife. The husband comes home and says, I want a divorce. What does a wife need to be, to exist? Needs a husband. When the husband says, I want a divorce, how do you think the wife responds to that? She's fighting for her life. She's fighting for her existence. In one simple statement of, I want a divorce, and not only do I want a divorce, I want custody of the kids, I would wager to say that most of your identity was tied up into those two states of being. Am I right?
No, I had a job too.
Okay. Okay. She had a job, so you got a career woman. In other words, it defines her. I'm a wife, right? This is why I lovingly said today, my wife, right? See, it's a way of defining who we are, but it's always coming externally. So that's in the big book. It talks about in that state, what state, i.e., he uses the word characters. When the husband says, "I want a divorce and custody of the kids," he just said that the wife doesn't exist. He just said the mother doesn't exist. I want to give you an example of how powerful this is, because there's no reality to any of that. We're in the world to play the role that God assigns. It's one thing to play a role that God assigns. It's got a name to it, the wife, but there's another to be attached to it. I picked up an article in Houston, Texas, and there was a woman, socialite type, and the article said what she had done is taken a gun and murdered her 2 children and then killed herself. And the article went on to say, and here's why. Her husband, who was a well-known surgeon in the Houston area, had decided to divorce her as with another woman. And it went on and it used these great words, that she was a loving mother and a devoted wife. Oh, and he was going to get the house and he was going to get custody. Everything that defined who this woman is, when he said to her, "I want to be divorced," there was nothing left, because she actually thought that's who she was. She was fighting for her life to the point of she killed her 2 children and committed suicide. This is the kind of stuff that you look at in inventory. This is the tragedy of the ego. This is why you can't say things like, "God bless you, go in peace," because you think something has now defined you. I'll give you an example. I'll use myself. To use the ego state, if you will. I'm an alcoholic. That's one, right? I'm a spiritual mystic to be. That's 2, right? I very much am Rambo. That's 3. Soldier of fortune, stuff like that. I'm CEO of a company. That's 4. I'm a jock. I lift weights. I run. I am my body, right? That's 5. I'm a writer. That's 6. That's enough for now, right? I'm single. That's 7, okay? The more I am attached to self-will, those are my 7 areas. How do you think I'm going to respond if something hurts, threatens, or interferes with any one of those 7 areas because I think they define me? Then imagine this. Imagine this in one day, right? Because, the job's gone. Say you're in a relationship. Say you had that going on. In one day, here's what happens. Okay, this recently just happened to a woman I know in AA. You lose the job. The relationship ends. They take the house away. They take the car away. You lose custody of the child. I mean, imagine that. Because a lot of times that's happened to different people. And this woman called me because that's basically what happened to her. It literally happened in about 2 days. And she called me and said, I don't know who I am. And I said, fantastic. Fantastic. What a deal. So I hope that could explain a little bit more. So when I write inventory, like for example, under the question in there, who do you resent? I put column 1, it's an employee that recently terminated. Her name would be in column 1. Column 2, why? Didn't perform to her job specifications. Which character is affected by that? The CEO. See? Because the CEO, what does the CEO of a company need to be to exist? Needs the company to be profitable and blah, 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 blah. So if you're an employee and I'm trapped in being the CEO and you're doing something that's not contributing to that, I see that as me fighting for my life, and you are going to experience me, and not in a kind, loving way. Therein lies the tragedy of the ego. That is a horrible way to live life, because your whole day from the time you get up till the time you get home, your whole life is totally dictated by external events. So the purpose of inventory, when I write inventory now, I say to myself, which character is mad? Which stage character has been hurt, threatened, or interfered with? And as soon as I identify the stage character, it is so easy to write my 3rd and 4th column. They just flow right off the pen.
And let's throw a little twist on that. Let's say the person that he has to fire is a friend of his because they met in the program, he got her the job, and now she's working for him. Now here's another twist. The CEO is fighting for his life, and the friend is also fighting for his life, especially if she's in the program, because now you got this colluded relationship here. The relationship is clouded because you got this program connection. You've got these this fractured loyalties, and who's going to win? If he's going into that asleep, I guarantee the right thing is not going to occur. But if he can realize as soon as those emotions start to rise in him, and he can say, wow, the CEO's talking to me, the friend is talking to me, the program person's talking to me, I must be afraid, slam on the brakes and go to the card, that he can get free of that and be connected to God, and whatever is supposed to happen will happen with love, kindness, and compassion.
Here's a quote from a book that says, be in the world but not of the world. I know what that means today, right? I'm in the world to play the role that God has assigned, but I'm not attached to the role. You could take that all away from me. I don't care. It's not who I am. None of it is who I am. I am followed by nothing. That's who I am. I am, and anything I tag on to that is who I'm not. That's what my inventory has shown me. See? So that's where you start to have peace and some ease. And what was the other one? Wear the world like a loose garment. How do you do that? You cannot do it attached to those ego states, i.e. inventory. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, has the power to kill me. See? I experience it as though I'm fighting for my life. You've heard several people around relationships and drinking and anger and rage. Why? Because they experienced it at that moment in time as though they're fighting for their life. Because it's defined who they think they are. It's a tragedy. It's sad because it's not who we are. See?
That's right. Now here's the deal. If you can be conscious, awake, and aware that this is going on, you've got a new tool in your toolbox if you've done this work. So what do? You start to feel that tenseness in your chest. You can feel the agitation. You can feel the blood pressure start to rise. If you're conscious of it, now you've got at least another chance before you open your mouth. Have I talked about the 1 second rule here? Oh, it's a great concept. Great concept. People, I've heard this statement a lot lately. Time doesn't mean anything in AA, right? We're all just one day sober, all right? Well, to try to pour a little oil on the water and settle this thing a little bit, I'm going to give you an out. It's called the 1 second rule. For every year of sobriety, you get 1 more second, all right? So let's say I ask a guy with 30 days a question. Before I can even get the question out, he's already thought the answer in his head, and his mouth is moving. Here comes the answer. 0 time limit. There's no second at all. Person who's got 1 year sober, they might actually think for a second, but meanwhile their ego's still trying to formulate the answer. So I'm 20 years sober. Hopefully I got 20 seconds before I respond, that I can be present in the moment. You get a second a year, folks. It's a great way to look at sobriety. So however long you're sober, put it in terms of seconds. Before you respond to anything, if somebody comes into you and says, I'm taking your wife, your kids, your car, your house, all your money, and pulls out a gun and says, I'm going to take your life, before you react, count those seconds. Get centered, be peaceful in the moment with God, and the right answer will come. The big books, or the 12 and 12 says, nothing pays off like restraint of tongue and pen. It's in that order for a reason. We have a hard time biting our tongue. So now that you got this tool of being able to recognize, because you're getting up on your 10th and 11th, and we'll be talking a lot about this tomorrow, with that word watch, and you see the character, and you go to your second step card, and your second step proposition, you say, okay, God, I'm feeling this fear. Please remove it from me and help me to be this, 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 and this. A lot of people then get jammed up if this, and this doesn't happen right away. And there's a tool that the old timers used. It was part of the Oxford group, and it's called the 4 absolutes. You almost never hear about the 4 absolutes anymore. And we're going to take a quick break. Before we take the break, I'm going to hand out the 4 absolute exercise. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the 4 absolutes. It's another 4-step tool. Once you get your handout, then we'll take a 15-minute break.
All right. Good stuff.
Great stuff. Have been talking about the characters and want to know where they get the characters and the whole 9 yards. I do have, me, I'm anal. Yes, I do have a list of characters on my computer. Unfortunately, I don't think I have it on my laptop in the other room, so you're going to have to email me. And if anybody does want to email me, my email address is aadave1@aol.com. I'll say that again. It's aadave1. That's the numeric one, numeric character one, at aol.com. I always feel sorry for AA Dave because he gets a lot of bizarre emails. But no, I don't know him. I wish I did. I'd like to have a conversation with the boy, cause see what he gets. Anyway, that's the deal. Before the break, we were talking about characters, and we were talking about what goes on inside the mind and the ego. And a couple quick things that people came up that had questions. Somebody said I started out by talking about 4 things. She said there's the body, and then there's the mind, and then there's the ego. But where's the last one? And I said, well, you were so concerned about the body and the mind and the ego, you missed the last one, which was the present moment. The present moment is the only place that the spirit can be. I know it went by fast, but that's number 4. If you're in the present moment, that's the only place you can be consciously contacted to God, is in the present moment. That's where your spirit lives. It's kind of an interesting concept because, for your ego to survive, it needs past and future. It doesn't survive in the present because it can't be in the control in the present, because that's where spirit is. And spirit doesn't need time. It could care less. If you believe like I believe, your spirit's going to go on forever. So it's timeless. It doesn't care about time. Time means nothing to the spirit. That's why the question needs to be asked, where's the only place that time doesn't exist? In the present moment. Because it's timeless. Because as soon as you get to this present moment, It's just now we're in the next, now we're in the next, like that. All right. Another woman came up to me and she said, last night when you were talking, you said that, maybe that some of this would touch something and we'd have this experience. And she goes, I woke up horizontal across my bed this morning and I tossed and turned all night long. She goes, and then you made that, this morning you started talking about crying, and she goes, and I was over in the back crying. And she goes, and now, I feel like I got a lump in the middle of my stomach. And I said, yeah. I don't think that's the expression. Oops, hello. I don't think that's the expression she was looking for. And I said, what's got you? And she said, well, it's the job issues. And she went on about a couple different things. And I said, okay, that's the area of your life you're not willing to give over to God. It's the job issue. What are you afraid of? Write out those fears. And then look at what God wants you to be. Then do what's on page 68. Offer the fears to God. Ask Him to remove those fears, because you can't get rid of your own fears. Ask God to direct your attention to what He would have you be, and ask God to show you how to be that, and then be it right now. Well, if that doesn't do it for you, and the fears continue to creep back, and you keep praying, you get into that cycle, and you're wondering what's next, there's more action that you can take. And that's what the 4 absolutes come from. All right? I copied most of this from there's a pamphlet that's put out by the Cleveland Central Committee Intergroup, has a pamphlet called 4 Absolutes. All right? And I didn't want to reprint the whole pamphlet, but I stole parts of it from here. And it says, what do the 4 absolutes mean to most of us? Words are tools. Like any other tools, they get rusty and corroded when not used. More importantly, we must familiarize ourselves with the tools and understand them and ever improve our skill in their use. Else the end product, if any, is pathetically poor. Just like everything else we've been talking about. You've got tools in your toolbox that you've known are there, but you didn't know how to use them, you weren't comfortable with them, so you haven't been using them. Just like brushing your teeth with the other hand. All right? The next quote comes, I put in parentheses. Anytime you see parentheses in anything I write, the parenthesis means that it's me speaking, not something that I'm quoting from. I said it's written about the absolutes, but this is true of the principles of AA, the steps, the traditions, the concepts, the absolutes, the 9th step, and the family afterward principles. Any tools you don't use will get rusty. So why not use them? As Bill sees it, from page 106, for myself, I try to seek out the truest definition of humility that I can. Perfect humility would be full willingness in all times and places to find and do the will of God. Sounds like we've been talking about all weekend. When I meditate upon such a vision, I only need to dwell on the vision itself, letting it grow and evermore fill my heart. This done, I can compare it with the last taken personal inventory. When I get a sane and healthy idea of where I stand on the highway to humility, I see that my journey towards God has scarce begun, and I thus get down to my right size and stature. My self-concern and importance become amusing. So, if you're having a hard time and you're all verklempt about this deal, and the hamster's getting back on the wheel, and you've tried the fear tool, and you've given the fears to God, and you're saying, God, help me to be courageous. Bill Wilson just said, get a vision of what that looks like in your mind. What does it look like? The tool that I turn to is the 4 absolutes. Absolute honesty, unselfishness, love, and purity. If I can go out and take direction, what does the big book say? It says, when all else fails, go out and work with another alcoholic. Well, what are you doing? You're being honest to him. You're sharing the true nature of your disease. Right? You're being loving, because the guy's probably got puke all over him and he smells, and you probably really don't want to do that, but you know you need to, but you don't really feel like it. All right? You're being honest, you're being loving, you're being pure to the true nature of integrity, of what you know. You're rising to the occasion, even if it's inconvenient. Right? You're living the absolutes. That's why it always works. The 4 absolutes, in my experience, work under any condition, but most people don't know what the 4 absolutes are. Right? Absolute honesty. Here's a definition I took out of the dictionary. Candid, direct, forthright, open, and sincere. It's there in the parentheses. And then I stole some of the quotes from the pamphlet from the 4 absolutes. Our sobriety is a gift, but honesty is a grace that we must earn and constantly fight to protect and enlarge. Over and over, we must ask ourselves, is it true or is it false? For honesty is the eternal search for truth. It is by far the most difficult of the 4 absolutes for anyone, but especially for us in this fellowship. The problem drinker develops genuine artistry in deceit. That sound like anybody in here? I used to think I had a problem with honesty. I have absolutely no problem with honesty. I have a problem with dishonesty. I tell lies. I'm dishonest. But my ego had convinced me that I had a problem with honesty. Honesty is easy. You get instant results. It's the fact that I don't want the results, so I'm not going to be honest. Control. All right? Any intended violation of honesty stabs the health of not only the doer, but the whole fellowship. Ooh. How's that for a powerful statement? Like sobriety, it's power of example that does the job. It's much simpler to appear honest than to be honest. Truth is life and falsity is spiritual death. It's an everlasting, unrelenting instinct for truth that counts. Honesty is not a policy. It has to be a constant state of mind. We must strive to be in reality what we appear to be. The real future in honesty lies in the persistent, dedicated striving for it. And once again, as Bill sees it from page 173. Sometimes we need to place love ahead of indiscriminate, factual honesty. We cannot, under the guise of perfect honesty, cruelly and unnecessarily hurt others. Always one must ask, what is the best and most loving thing I can do? So, I'm going to let Mark talk about honesty, and then we're going to sit down and we're going to get a vision, and we're going to write about what does it look like in my life for me to be truly, factually, purely honest to myself and those about me.
I have a question. How many of you would attend a weekend workshop somewhere with the sole focus being the fourth and fifth step? Okay, that's food for thought that came to me during the break. So the way you get experience with the fourth and fifth step is to do it. The way I got experience with inventory is I've written a lot of inventory. When I got out of the nut house in 91, my little sabbatical at 10 years, my truth was this. I just saw that I had not made this a way of life. The big book was very clear to me. For example, in the 10th step, they're very strict spiritual disciplines I'm to do every day. And they are laid out. I'm supposed to pray and meditate every morning, my book says, right? I didn't do that. I prayed. I didn't meditate my first 10 years. There's all kinds of 10-step practices that I wasn't doing, and all kinds of 11-step practices that I wasn't doing. And so at any rate, having finally at 10 years sober made that third-step decision and really having a sense of what that was about, the willingness brought about by almost committing suicide at 10 years sober. Over the next 2 years, I worked and reworked the first 9 steps 4 times, and I discovered reams of unwritten inventory. And I discovered a lot of unfinished amends that I had never seen before as a result of not writing enough inventory. And then I also began to, it was suggested to me, our big book, when it comes to a 5th step, it says do it with person or persons, plural. So it was suggested to me by a man long time sober that I consider doing what he called a multiple 5th step, which is you take some inventory and you read it to 5 different people. And I began to do all that, and my life began to change in ways I could not believe. And because here's why. It's in the 4th and 5th step that you get totally detached from ego, that mind-made false sense of self. And you really begin to experience who you really are, who you were before you came into this body and who you will be afterwards. The 6th sense, call it spirit, call it being, whatever you call it. And it's only from having conscious awareness of that part of you that you can begin to go through life with some sense of peace regardless of your life situation. We talked about that. You know what breaks, what drunks, what we always seem to be talking about is our life situation. I know what it's like to be consumed with your life situation and be missing out on your life. You understand what I just said? It's no fun. It's just truly not any fun. Because what I'm consumed with, I can't do anything about, but even though I try. So a lot of work with the 4th and 5th step. I've been, anyone says that to me, what do you do? I said, well, I've done a lot of work with steps 4 through 9. I mean a lot of work. Last year, I don't know, I wrote inventory probably 5 times last year. And I stay pretty current, right? Well, we're into this year. I've already done 1 inventory this year, and I just recently started a workshop, and I'll be doing another one. Why do I do that? Because I like the effect produced by it. So the key is to do it, though. You got to do the writing. One other thing, and I'll talk a little about honesty. In working with some people in the East Coast, when they do column 1, they'd call me and say, okay, I'm done. I've got 1,200 names. And I thought, okay. Here's what I've discovered. If you read the big book, it says that when you and I do a 4th and 5th step, what we're really trying to get at is the exact nature of our defects. It is not necessary that you write on 1,200 people to get at that. The ego only operates in a certain fashion. Example, a guy I'm working with now was in and out of AA, and I think he came to me, he had maybe 120 names in Dallas. I had him take 20 names. Now, we're going to keep the 120 because we're probably going to look at him for amends. I only had him take 20 names, and I showed him how to write a 4-column inventory with 20 names. First of all, I'm not going to feed his ego that much by having him write a 4-column inventory in 120 names because, again, the ego only operates in a certain fashion. The whole function of the 4-step is to find out the exact nature of the defects. I don't need to write on 120 names to find that out. 20 is probably 10 too many. We developed the fear inventory out of his 3rd and 4th column, and then I had him write a sex inventory. I had him take 5 or 6 relationships, most current, work back, answer 9 questions. We did that. Something that in the past would have taken me probably months with him, he finished in about 2 weeks. Did a 5th step. He's into amends now. So there's been a real shift in me over the years, but particularly, and I suppose it's because you all live in such close proximity to each other. There's a lot of you around. I don't know why these lists are so big, but I met one guy out here who was 3.5 years writing an inventory. And I nowhere in this book, nowhere was it ever intended that that's happened. Something's gotten missed in there. So those of you that, I'm just throwing that out there because I don't go there anymore. I'm not going to have you write 120 names. Now, that's my concept. It's what I work with. Maybe other people here would like to write on the whole 120, but I'm just not going to indulge my self-will to that extent anymore because it's not necessary. So those are some of my ideas. Now, honesty, some of us in here know a guy named Big Frank, and kind, gentle, loving man. Yeah.
Quiet, too.
Yeah. But, the definition of honesty, say what you do what you say. And somewhere around, I guess, 14 years sobriety, I really started working with that. And for 2 years, it took me 2 years to get even close to this definition of honesty. Here's what I mean. I'll simplify it in some respects. I say to you, I'm going to call it 8. I call it 8:15. I didn't call you at 8:15 because I was late calling. I called you because I'm a liar. I said I'd call you at 8. Say what I do what I say. Bills, electric company. They make an agreement. We're going to give you electricity. We're going to float you for 30 days.
Bless you.
We'd like our money on the 5th. I'd send it, and they get it on the 6th. I wasn't late. I wasn't careless. I'm dishonest. And I begin to look at my life, and it was absolutely incredible. I'll meet you here, and I'd cancel, and I'd overbook, and I begin to see how my ego operated in that fashion. Every single area of my life. You'd say to me, how are you doing? I'd lie and say I'm doing well. There it is. So that's my experience with this, and I mean this. It took me every area of my life, from my physical health to finances to relationships with others, I begin to see dishonesty at a level I just had never seen before. Now, you learn some great lessons on the other side. One of them is, Dave will tell you, when he asked me to come here and do this, I tell people, well, I'll consider that. Prior to working on this issue of honesty, oh, sure, I'll be there. And all of a sudden you wake up and your calendar's full and you're resentful and trying to do too much. But and now there's a strange connection between working with this concept of honesty and how you feel about yourself and how you experience life. One of the things the man that I work for that he enjoys about me, we were talking about something the other day, and I totally missed this one inspection we were supposed to have that's fairly important, and and just means our license, ability to do business, no big deal, but We were talking, and I looked him dead in the eye. I said, "Man, I spaced it. I absolutely spaced it." And he started laughing. He said, "What are you laughing at?" And he said, "It's so refreshing that your ego didn't give me 92 reasons why they didn't come to do that inspection. You just simply said, I blew it. I didn't plan it. I didn't write it out." So, but there's such a connection between trying to live, not trying, but living your life in that fashion and having a lot of peace and freedom in your life. And you begin to work in a lot of ways, in relationships, in which I have close relationships with males and females, to be honest in those relationships in a loving and compassionate way about how I think or how I feel, or to be honest in this way. I have an agreement with people I call spiritual consent. Like Dave and I have spiritual consent. What that means is if he's around me or we talk and he hears me say something that indicates to him I may be asleep to something, I've given him consent to point that out to me, right? Well, I don't go walking up to people who haven't given me spiritual consent, those kinds of things. But so that's some of my experience with this issue of honesty, Internal Revenue Service. The list is broad, but it took me 2 years in all areas of my life to really look at this. And I saw the quality of my life improve dramatically as a result of it, because I'm not walking around trying to cover up something. One time I like I said, I say I don't know a lot, and I say, I was wrong, and the freedom in being able to do that is a wonderful thing. So that's really all I got.
The same rules apply for this exercise. We're not going to have time to finish it, obviously. When I first wrote out my vision in my life for the Four Absolutes, I spent hours looking at it. For one, of delusion, you won't see it unless you really have. I prayed, meditated, and asked God to show me first before I do any kind of step work, to open my heart and give me some vision to see the truth of what's here, and then remove the fear so that I can face the truth that I see. Sometimes I'll see it and I don't want that. And once the bullet's out of the barrel, you put the pen on the paper, man, look out. You can't take that back. I use the tornado exercise. When I'm trying to get a vision in my life, what does it look like to be honest? Start with your immediate family. You can do this exercise at work in all different areas. Where I found it to be the most effective is just do the people in your immediate family. If you're single, just do the people that are closest in your life. If you've got a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or if you've got some sponsees, that little clique that you kind of hang out with, your buds, do that group. But if you're married and you've got kids, start out with your spouse relationship. What does it look like to be honest with my spouse? Do I tell her about the extra $50 that I skim off the paycheck she doesn't know about? Or do I tell her about the extra check they cut in February because it's a 5-week month or whatever? There's those kind of dishonesties. I've run into all kinds of things with guys when I talk about this subject. Recently, I ran into a guy he couldn't pay his bills, yet he was spending $1,200 a month on $1,200 a month on hookers. But in his mind, he wasn't being dishonest, and he was still married, and, there wasn't an issue. And he couldn't pay his bills. I know another guy who could pay his bills. He was making lots of money, and he was spending $1,000 a month on massages. But he didn't see anything wrong with that. That's the kind of denial and delusion that we can find ourselves in. Delusion at first because he didn't see it, and then once I show it to him, then comes the denial. I'm not looking at that. I don't want to... and you don't hear from them for a while. That's when the Al-Anon side takes over and they go off and they do their own thing. They spiral. So spiral yourselves. Take a look at it. We're only just barely going to scratch the very tip of the surface tonight on these. And we've got 4 of them to go. So this is definitely going to be homework for you, But let's give it a shot. Let's take a minute and... couple minutes and we'll start writing on honesty.